Hi everyone, welcome back to anyone listening again. I think there's 3 people probably. And then anyone joining us for the first time, welcome along. I'm going to share a little bit about this podcast and also our wonderful guest today. I love these conversations because it does give me an opportunity to chat to people who I know and some of which I've known for a very long time about topics that are of interest and I'm passionate about in the world of professional services and customer success and B2B tech. Really, over the last year, we've seen a massive change with our worlds being turned upside down, both in our home lives and in our work lives. And I think more and more people and companies are looking for new ways of working that can help them manage their work in the context of their lives, given that everything is remote and the continuing pressures that we all face. Now, we're working at Precursive with a range of companies across high tech, SaaS, professional services and communications, among others. And across all of these sectors, we see a real significant focus on how we can deliver more value more quickly to our customers. And oftentimes, of course, the responsibility for that success lies with the team responsible for the post-sale journey, the implementation organization, professional services, customer success. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jon Harrison, who is the VP of Professional Services and Customer Success at Sage for the UK and Ireland. So sitting across both those worlds. Jon, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. All things considered. Thanks for taking the time today. For those tuning in, can you maybe share a little bit about your background and your role at Sage, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So you said, I'm Vice President of Services and Success for Sage across the UK and Ireland. So what that means is I look after everything post-sale. So professional services, customer enablement, customer services, and customer success. So in the UKI, Sage has about 500,000 customers, and I have a team of around about 800 across those 4 teams.
Okay.
And I've been in post now for a couple of years. But prior to that, I worked for a startup and scale up, which was called Fairsale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Fairsale were an HCM technology specialist. That's what we did. Focused on the SME, the small to medium enterprise. And I joined them in 2014 when Fairsale was a team of about 30. And really started to grow the professional services business there. And Fairsale grew to over 200 people and was acquired by Sage in March 2017 and became Sage People. So really going through the startup scale-up journey, taking what was Fairsale to be acquired for 23 times the original valuation in 2013 of Fairsale. So after running services globally for Fairsale and Sage People, I took the UKI role for Sage.
And because I remember you telling me it was like a few $100,000 in services revenue at Fairsale, and when it got acquired, it was 6 million or something. Was that right?
So
is my memory right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started when I joined. We had a professional services team of 5.
Yeah.
Doing about 250,000 a year in PS revenue.
Okay.
And when I left, so it would have been end of 2018. We were doing 6 million in services revenue and implementation with a team of 30 internally. So that was our embedded team, and we had a partner network as well, a partner delivery network. So yeah, quite a journey.
And now 500,000 customers.
Absolutely, yeah. So Sage now has 500,000 customers in the UK, and the focus area really for Sage now is accountancy and finance software, but as well as that is HR and payroll as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Quite a journey I've been on.
Yeah, and a diverse role. I bet that report, when you try to run that report in Salesforce with loads of additional fields, and it takes a while to load.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Yeah, time.
Cool. So we've known each other a while. Certainly, had a few conversations last year in this new remote realities, we're calling it, or just, the remote working now, really, it's reality.
Yeah.
So curious to know really kind of how this way of working is really kind of bedded in now, I would say. And certainly some people are like really enjoying it. Others, the luster is worn off, as it were. Having had to adapt to this, how would you describe some of the ways that you and your team are adapting or have continued to adapt your approach to working in this environment?
Really good question. And I think, honestly, the answer's probably changed every month. But I think being a SaaS business has been there's been a constant emphasis on customer service and experience. But I think that's also meant that we've had to keep the team engaged. And I think a few things have probably happened faster than maybe we would have thought. So I think if you look at the market before I look at the team, I think that digital transformation that's been talked about and everybody is talking around has probably been prioritized. And I think, it's more important than ever now that people understand how to use Teams, how to use Zoom, and actually the art of the possible. I didn't think a year ago we'd have written an entire business plan through Teams, but we did. And I think it's the same thing with our colleagues and our customers. I think, staying connected with each other and working hard to maintain those communications internally, but also with customers as well, has been and will continue to be the most important thing. I think, we found ourselves in a position where we needed to adapt to home working. I think by the nature of professional services, we've had a cohort of people who are used to that way, right? They're used to being on the road or used to working in hotels and working from home. But on the flip side of that, I've got a customer services organization, for example, where there's 600 people who have never worked from home. So providing the tools for those guys and the resources to get used to this way of working has been a challenge. And probably the same as everybody else, right? We've done the TikTok competitions, the fancy dress team calls, bingo, cake making. We've done it all. But I think most people are at a point now where they're done with it. And I think there's an element of people just need to kind of work their way through it. And I've got a thing at the moment where we're just letting people be a little bit dour because I think they need to. I don't think everybody wants to join a quiz at 6 o'clock on a Friday.
No. Agreed. Yeah. No, I think there's a degree of realism and pragmatism now that companies and people are getting to grips with. The dynamics of the relationship with the customer, because they're going through the same thing, really, right? We're all going through. Have you noticed a change in the way that they're behaving in projects over the last 12 months, or more expansively, how are the dynamics of those engagements changed as a result of remote work?
Yeah, again, I think there's been a shift. The digital transformation piece I referenced earlier has very much come to the fore. So I think we've seen more focus on sales process automation, going online, obviously video conferencing, but I think much more focus on the relationship has really come to the fore, the importance of just maintaining contact. I think if you remember, you'll probably go back long enough in this industry as I do, where there was a world where people didn't believe professional services were happening unless you were on site with the customer. They were like, well, I can't see them, therefore they're not doing their job. What am I paying for? I think we're over that now, right? And, the nature of SaaS means if there's Wi-Fi on the moon, we could do it from there, right? So I think that relationship, the digital piece, I think as well as that, the other element of services and professional services is that learning and education. So I think the availability of online content and self-serve for people to learn as they have that time, and flexibility. We have people who are doing split shift essentially to meet customer demands. We've all got carer responsibilities, and we're trying to run businesses, run our day jobs, but it's not linear anymore. The 9 to 5 has gone.
Yep.
Right? So We've got people doing 8 till 12,
Yep.
and 4 till 8, and we've done some similar things internally. Now, we've banned meetings between 12 and 2 so people can go and spend time with their family or do what they need to do. So
Yeah.
I think,
Okay.
yeah, that's been a real obvious shift.
Okay. And so, because I think in my experience, like you talked about writing a business plan, right? 100% remotely.
Yeah.
In professional services, particularly in B2B software SaaS,
Yeah.
in those implementations, there's going to be conversations that are going to run typically more than an hour, right? Where you're looking to do diagnosis or discovery, solution architecture, solution mapping, whatever it is, right? Like
Yeah.
whatever the stage is. And I think that's quite hard to do virtually because people are worn out of being virtual, right? And they're not, maybe their attention isn't on it as much as it would be maybe in the room. Is that a thing? Are you splitting up the work into smaller increments, for example, like I've heard elsewhere, as a result of a little bit of that fatigue?
Absolutely. So a prime example here is on our Sage People product. So that used to be a 3-day fully intensive discovery workshop session, where you had all your SMEs in a room, you had a couple of consultants, you had decision makers all sitting there kind of plowing through process maps, requirement gathering. That's just not sustainable anymore. So absolutely you're seeing more 2-3 hour sessions, much more agile, much more focused. But I think aligned to that as well, a lot of the SaaS products now, if I, again, I'll focus on HCM. If I sit in front of an HR director and say, what do you want? Then we're doing it wrong, because most people buy cloud technology because they say, well, it's your product. You tell me how to do it. How do I maximize my ROI? How do I get the best of your product? So I think there's two things there. I think what it's done is it's really forced this mindset of best practice and how do you deliver to customers and deliver ROI that much faster by delivering best practice, because the days of sitting in a room for 3 days are done. And I think this has just accelerated that.
It's interesting. I mean, I started thinking about this the other day. If you were to look at the classic services project plan with like, a project plan and effort estimation over a period of time, and you look at it now, it's like you say, it's way more agile, it's way more liquid, it's way more bitty, right? Because you don't have these in-person workshops. So actually managing that in terms of capacity, potentially you have got less complexity around things like travel. Like this is one of the things I've heard from a lot of companies. It's like, well, it's easier for us to get the meetings and get senior people together or get people together because we can do it virtually, but we're not going to keep them together for as long as we did previously. So we're saving money on expenses and time and travel, but it means that we've got to be better at managing capacity because that time might be spread out over 2 weeks, for example. So yeah, it's an interesting shift, I think, into the methods of delivery is, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think we'll probably see that evolution into the future. I think you read a lot around, will people ever return to the office? And I think whilst it's unlikely that our future will be 100% remote, there's going to be consequences from this year of working differently. We've already touched on flexibility being more important. But you're right. If you talk about travel, for example, I think the focus with my commercial head on, the focus on costs and margin, and therefore travel or offices, etc., will play a bigger part. And then I think, to your point on employees and resources and customers, they've given up their commutes, right? And they enjoy that flexibility in balancing work and home. So I think even though there's been trade-offs in face-to-face and how things are done, I think we need to be mindful of that going forward, because I think employees now are going to want to sustain this way of working. So I think that flexibility is going to be a key part of what we have to think about going forward. So it may well be that you don't have a consultant working on 1 project, 2 projects. They may work on 4 or 5 because there's a different way of working.
Agreed.
And I
Agreed.
think employees are going to want a different path now.
Hmm. Yep. So turning now just more broadly to like the role of professional services. So, um, in the world of software and SaaS, and you've worked across both, and you work across both now, right? You've got both cloud solutions and on-prem solutions, right?
Yeah.
But just broadly, how would you describe the role and importance of professional services in this sector?
It's a really good one, and I think over the past few years, um, there's been a lot of debate around this. Um, I
Agreed.
think professional services capability is a key element of any software implementation and any startup and scale up within this world. Actually, I think there's a misconception that any B2B SaaS project doesn't involve services. I think in my experience, and hopefully most people that are going to listen to this, it's not true. Certainly not for mid-market and enterprise level customers. Now, every company wants to make it easy for customers, right, to buy from there and to implement. So I think the job from a professional services standpoint is how do we remove those barriers for entry? So how do we make it easy? How do we reduce implementation cost? How do we make it easy and focus on best practice for these customers when they might not necessarily know what they want? So I think there's always going to be a place, but there's a lot of considerations as to how it's done. And you reference there on-prem and SaaS. Do you take the same approach when in a SaaS environment as you do to an on-premise? So this whole concept of professional services revenue is bad and should be banished from our revenue mix, I think is quite divisive. I think there's always a part to play. I think it's a critical component. I think it depends on how you structure yourself as a business. I think it's how you partner, how you organize yourself, and how your organization wants to position themselves in the market, because then that impacts on your internal capability, your capacity for growth, etc., etc.
Is it the complexity of this world that interests you and keeps you motivated after as many years working in this space as you have? Is that part of the challenge? The maths of it is simple, but it doesn't always work out that way, right? What is it that motivates you about this world?
I've got a, I'm a pretty simple guy.
Yeah.
um, and for me, I think I've kind of touched on is how do we remove professional services costs as a barrier for entry to the customer?
Okay.
How do we drive that fast time to value, great product adoption, and ensure that customer gets their ROI, as well as delivering a commercial return for my employer? The challenge there is how do you do it without devaluing the service you provide, all the knowledge, the domain expertise, or the IP you've got? And that's the bit where I'm interested, because I'm always trying to find, well, what's next? How do we make it better? How do we make it quicker? And that's a challenge because, let's be brutally honest, I can't make data migration sexy. Okay, I can't make UAT any more interesting than it is. What I can do is make it easy. And that's where the things like the methodology come in, the tools, the automation, the engagement, and that's where you start to stray into the boundaries of customer success, right? So that's what keeps me going, I guess.
And you've talked to me about the importance of having a mission in professional services, and if you will, a what are you for? Tell us more about that and where that came from and why it's important.
Yeah, I think since the dawn of time, I think you can say that successful projects haven't just been about technology, right? I think the people and processes are just as important, and they need to change in order to bring value and benefit. And every business starts with different people, different processes, and PS is there to understand the start point and help design and achieve the planned outcome. And the what are you for, as used to say, is actually what one of my old bosses used to ask of us. And it's important to establish what you're trying to achieve through professional services and how do you support those wider goals. So, services, I think, is a mix of get, grow, or retain. And I think they have quite different needs. So I think being clear on that is critical to how you deploy your resources, your structure, and how you align to the wider business. I think, services now, there are SaaS platforms where the product is fairly self-explanatory and or more plug and play, and users are onboarded through customer enablement, such as in product help or e-learning. And then I think on the flip side of that, there's the more enterprise level products where they're more complex, where they need significant configuration. And I stress configuration, not code. Where there's more user enablement, more extensive product onboarding is needed, and that requires that level of SME from a professional services function. So that's kind of the what are you for question.
No, I think it's interesting because we talk about things in this company that bind us together, right? Bind us together as a team between different departments, because it's between the cracks in departments where things can fall through, right? In terms of like ownership and something then impacting the customer. And I think that mission for every department is really important. I think the services world is interesting because so much of it is bound up with the customer, right? Like you are there, your role day to day is to make customers successful, right? And you're so influential on the overall relationship with the client long term because you're the first project, for example, that they might see from you as a vendor, right? So there's so much hinging on that in terms of the relationship, long-term client relationship, the as you say, retention and growth and all of those things. To what degree do you think the mission of the services team and the mission of the business have to align and overlap or speak the same language? What do you think about that?
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because, and I think, again, all service leaders will think about the conversations they've had with the sales function, where it's always services or product that stop them selling,
Right.
And I think certainly for an embedded services org, I think you need to consider a couple of different aspects as part of your mission, really. So are you there to successfully implement your products and help customers achieve their outcomes and their business goals? Are you there to be pre-sales? Are you there to do proof of concept and help drive customer satisfaction through wider services? Or are you there to support partners in how they replicate your internal teams and their approach with customers? I think different operating models can achieve different commercial outcomes. And I think as the business matures, and we saw this with Fairsail, ultimately up to Sage People, is the maturity of the PS business and the wider business really determined what we did and how we did it. And I think once you've defined and aligned to that corporate mission, then I think the role of services becomes clearer. Because what you do in a startup is very, very different to what you do in a scale up and an enterprise level services business.
Okay. All right. And so if you think about breaking down the core components of quote unquote world-class professional services capability, you and I have been working along with some others on this upcoming Precursive playbook, and one of the sections in that is this anatomy of a world-class services organization. So tell us a bit about the different key components that a great services team needs to have.
Yeah, I think there's a number of different things, and we can touch on some of this in detail. But I think the first one is strategy and business model. So we've spoken about the mission, and the business model changes, and therefore your org structure is related to that. How are you going to set yourself up? I think second to that is alignment to sales. So again, we've spoken around how does professional services engage in the sales process? What are you there to do? You can't be a blocker to sales. So where do you get involved and how do you get involved? It's not a mistake that services guys are the best guys at selling services. And then linking to that is pricing as well. I spoke earlier on about removing blockers. What's fair market value for the services you offer versus the wider market dynamic. I think the third one for me is operations. So what are your internal processes? What does your tech stack look like, your technology? How do you use your data? Resource management for me is critical in that as well. Partners would be the fourth one. And again, I touched on this earlier on, and every organization is different as to how they use partners and when, but looking at your ecosystem, looking at enablement and partner education, and actually understanding if a partner model will sustain in your domain. So looking at the addressable market, looking at how you're going to go to market, look at how you work with these partners, because there's a number of different ways you can do it. And I think finally the metrics is a big one. I think some of the metrics that we know and love of old maybe don't have a place in today's operations. I think we can probably all have a debate around the validity of utilization. Been around forever and a day, right? And some people love it, some people hate it. So I think
the yeah but metric.
Exactly. But I've been in organizations where you had a utilization measure of 85%, and others where it was 65%. Both were deemed acceptable for those businesses because they were in different states, right? So those for me would kind of be the critical components. But as I said, once you understand all that, I think it then will lead you to structure, organize, understand how your organization wants to position themselves in the market.
What do you go to first? Like if you're trying to build that or refine how well you do things. So if you're the people who listen to this show, they range from, I would say, scale ups all the way through to enterprise. So regardless of where you are on that journey, so you're either building capability or refining and trying to improve capability. So where would you start first? You mentioned resource management is a critical component, for example, but is there like a sequence of things that you would start with in order to build up that capability over time, for example?
I think once you're clear on the business strategy and the what are you for, as we touched on earlier on, for me, then I look at what is professional services, and ultimately it's SME and it's people. So have I got enough people? So resource management for me is a huge one. Why is that? Because I think effective management of resources can have a massive impact on your margin and your success. So for me, one thing I've always done is made sure that I have really strong resource management and they have a seat at my leadership table. They're the glue that holds the machine together. If they're not aware of current projects, but also the sales pipeline, the likelihood of winning, and they're not testing the sales guys, they should be testing the close dates on these new deals coming in, right? Testing the forecasting, testing the close dates. If they're not doing that, then they're not doing us justice as a professional services function. So the same as you would expect them to know the delivery schedule of a project or the resource allocation, skills, or revenue and utilization forecast, skills matrix, or key person dependencies even. They're not doing justice. They need to be shoulder to shoulder with sales operations. And they're my right-hand man, really, right-hand person, I should say. Because if they don't know what's going on, then I haven't got the right people in the right place at the right time with the right skill set. I don't have a PS business. So for me, resource management is up there.
It's an art form.
It absolutely is.
It's an absolute art form combined with art and science as well.
It really is. It really is. Especially when you've got multiple products. I mean, I know we're talking about PS, but my customer services team, I have a team of 10 in my resource management team over there, just to track availability, skills. When you're getting 10,000 calls a day, it's huge. So resource management across the piece would be my go-to, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the area where, again, the pandemic has really shone a light on how good that capability is, right? Because you're getting so much either pull through and push back of work, more volatility. As you say, I think the individuals in those roles are, akin to the HR business partners, finance business partners, legal business partners that you'll find in large enterprises, because they are so critical as the nodal point between the promises that are being made in sales and the fulfillment of those promises in delivery. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how almost like the training, development, and certification of capability in that area grows over time. You've seen it in customer success, for example, right? And you've seen it in areas of professional services, particularly around project management, where people are certified in certain delivery methodologies, for example, or now in customer success, people are getting certified in customer success. I think it's something that will come into the world of resource management, because I think it is just so.
I think it has to, because inherently services is one of your biggest costs, right? And when you look at the revenue contribution for any SaaS business or services versus the cost, it's huge. Because inherently these individuals are usually highly skilled and wanted by the market. So I think you're right. I think having a view on that, I think is an underpin for any successful services business.
Yeah, well, the best ones, I think, treat it like talent management as much as resource management, right? It's like you are, like you say, you haven't got an unending supply of your assets, which is your people and the skills, so you need to retain them. Given you have this role, this dual role covering different areas, services, customer success, which is a increasingly common trend, particularly in the software sector, right? Of the blurring of these worlds and then the merging of these worlds. So you see companies where they have like either head of services, head of success, and then they potentially put them together, or it's being unpacked. So there's different trends. But let's talk a little bit about how the rise of customer success has influenced the world of services and vice versa, perhaps. So customer success plays such a big role, obviously, in your organization and in your team. So tell us a little bit about that and balancing those two worlds in Sage. Like, because just tell us a little bit about how you play that balancing act, because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's customer success, right, is one of these distinguishing elements, isn't it, of a successful cloud business. And when you look at an organization like Sage, there's almost, you almost have to have two different models, because actually you've got X 100,000 customers, many of whom are what I would call the smaller end. So it could be the individual small business owner, employing 10, 20 people. And then likewise, you've got the enterprise level organization with multiple tens of thousands. How do you do customer success for that scale? So they're very, very different models. So looking at how you dovetail customer service, the customer success and professional services is going to be a challenge. And if I look at the small segment, at the lower end, it's obviously highly data driven. And can you really have those one-to-one discussions that you would have and would like to have at more the medium SME upper end? But I think what's really important is you kind of have to look at it and say, it's a major project for any organization to put in software. We know that. Likewise, it's a major operation to have to rip it out and go live with a replacement. It's hassle that the customer that would rather avoid, and it has to be pretty broken for that to happen, right? So customer success for me is about aiming to make sure our customers are happier than grudgingly agreeing not to change software providers. So to that end, professional services absolutely sets customer success up for success, for a better term. That symbiotic relationship is there, where one can't do without the other. Those touch points, those handoffs have to occur throughout the process. So understanding where customer success engages in the process. With some of our enterprise products, the customer success team will engage in the sales process. For others, they will then engage at the support handover. But I think what's really, really important is all the way from the sales process, we have customer success plans here. And those customer success step plans start pre-sale, and they will live with their customer throughout the life of their engagement. So those customer success plans are being populated through the sales process with why the customer is doing this project. What are the challenges? What's the makeup? What's the business calendar? What are they trying to achieve? Because through the sales process, you're going to get different perspectives, right? You're going to get the CTO, the CIO, the HRD, the CFO, all have a different need and a different want. That has to be translated to the professional services guys to make sure we're delivering, and we quantify those success criteria through the implementation. Certainly through the design phase, which we spoke about earlier on, has changed. So getting those different dynamics and all of that then rolls forward to customer success. And actually, how do you take that forward? How do customer success engage and pay attention and make sure that that ROI that was defined way back when can be delivered through your customer success management team? And that may well be 6, 9, 12 months down the line.
It is really hard though, because you've got oftentimes two quite different mentalities in the two tribes, right? In services, you've got a lot of very process driven, analytical, some from a technical background, right? And I've seen conversations in our own business as well, where it's like a services person saying, well, why would the customer want to do that? That's like a bad idea, right? Because they know that that's not best practice. Whereas the customer success person is saying, well, like, I'm almost like an enabler. And so they're more inclined to not to always be saying yes, but like, okay, well, yeah, we can look at that, we can do that. And then and it's just this, I find sometimes there's just this almost like natural predisposition for a little bit of a clash. And you really have to work very hard at, do you know what I mean? You're smiling for those who are listening. I'm smiling, so you know exactly what I'm talking about here.
I'm smiling, and the reason I'm smiling is one of your previous podcastees, for want of a better term, was a guy called Alex Farmer, I believe.
Yeah.
And Alex used to work for me.
Yeah.
And we used to have this argument almost daily.
Yeah.
Because he was the customer success guy and I was the PS guy.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. How do you find that grey line in the middle? And you can probably throw customer support into that as well.
Yeah.
Right? So what sits where and how much should you do? And it's an ongoing challenge, isn't it, for customer success to say, do you want customer success managers who can speak confidently about the product? Do you want customer success managers who are more commercial in their mindset? What do you as a business want customer success to be? To your point, do I want a customer success manager to sit and do configuration for 2 hours? No.
Yeah.
Do I want a customer success manager that can talk about it? Yes.
So we've seen this because we operate in the Salesforce ecosystem. So that means that all of our customers are on that platform. And what we have come to realize is all of our services team and our support team is Salesforce certified, as an example, right? But now all of our sales teams getting certified and all of our CS teams getting services certified. Why? Because for exactly that reason. Because what's sometimes happening is that the lack of technical acumen in some instances is like leads to a place where you're having to not backtrack, but repair or maybe go back on something that you've said. It's like, yeah, we'll see if that's possible. Customer hears, oh, vendors told me that's possible, right? And then rolls into the services team is like, well, yeah, that is possible, but that's going to be quite a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so I think there's almost that within this anatomy that you and I have talked about of like this capability within the services team, it's also the capability of what sits outside the services team, right? Like you said, that partnership with sales, right? The more clued up sales is on what an implementation looked like, what is involved, how long it takes, what's included, what's excluded, and the more that they're trained and coached on how to deliver that to a client, the easier it makes the world of services, right? It's that, I just think it's that repair job that that services ends up trying to do at speed that's so hard.
Yeah, I saw something back end of last week actually on LinkedIn where somebody described customer success as the everything team.
Right.
And I kind of like that analogy and I personally would extend it to services where it's always been the dumping ground, right? The service and success team will sort it out. Doesn't matter what we sell, they'll sort it out. They'll make it possible. And I've found over the years my role is to explain the art of the possible versus the art of the appropriate to customers. And I've been in many sales meetings where I'm almost welcomed by the customers because they say, X salesperson is great, but you're the services guy, so you're going to tell me the truth.
Yeah.
You're gonna tell me what this is really gonna take.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
which in and of itself though is flawed, right? Because what you would want to be walking into is a world where it's like, that thing that you've been sold, that's exactly what it should be,
yeah,
right? And this is what I'm really big on in our business. I'm like, I want a reputation for accuracy, is what I describe it as. It's like what sales communicates to the customer should be as close to accurate on how long things take, how much they cost, what's included, what's excluded. We have an FAQ document now for
yeah,
services specific questions for salespeople. And it's one of the most valued documents I think we've got in the business, because all of the sales team are now able to use that in conversations, share it with customers, right?
yeah,
So they're going to say, these are the questions you're going to ask me. So I'm going to preempt them. Here you go.
yeah.
Because that accuracy then removes the the outliers, where it's like, how on earth did we end up in this situation with this client having sold this, at this amount, for example?
I agree, and there are certain rules we've put in place here, and it's very similar. We've got FAQs, we've got standard documentation around proposals. All the services guys are the only ones that can talk services, and even now, I'm the one that signs off every statement of work and every contract, because ultimately, what I won't do is take on a project that I know I can't make successful.
Right.
Because ultimately, I'm going to be picking up the pieces for X years afterwards. And it goes back to the earlier point around a customer who is happy rather than grudgingly sticking with us because they don't want to change.
Yeah, and there's a big difference between the two, isn't there?
Yeah, massively.
Cool. Well, on that note, there is a difference between a customer that is happy than grudgingly sticking with us. A positive note to end on. No, but a great conversation. Thank you ever so much, John, for taking the time. I think from my side, a few takeaways that I think are really interesting. I think one is that mission. Is everything starting from that mission? So if you've got that mission, if that mission is aligned to the goal of the business and the mission of the organization, that flows through and seeds everything in terms of how services teams and success teams can go about their daily lives. I think the change in the dynamics of delivery, not just in terms of how you're trying to manage people internally, but how you're trying to manage people internally in order to manage the changing dynamics of the customer, and what that's meaning to traditional forms of delivery, e.g. the amount of time and effort that it takes and over what durations. That was super interesting. And I think also just that resource management and value being so intrinsically linked, like one can't happen with the other. I just don't think you can have fast time to value without great resource management, which is what you summarized for us. So thank you ever so much. Thanks for those of you tuning in. If you want to subscribe on any one of our platforms, be it Spotify or via our website, please go to precursive.com for more details on that, as well as other pieces of content, white papers. We have a new Precursive playbook coming out, I think, next month, which John has kindly contributed to. So you'll find some more expansive insight on the anatomy of a world-class PS organization, direct from Mr. Harrison. John, thank you ever so much for joining us, and stay safe and be well.
Pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Look after yourself.
All right. Thanks, John. Cheers.
Cheers.